It's immoral to let a sucker keep his money. Well, that's what the seasoned con artist would say. This cheeky motto might seem like a tongue-in-cheek justification for their crafty heists, but let's face it, sometimes it's hard to muster sympathy for their victims, especially when you hear about the outlandish scams they've fallen for. We've all heard about how some poor soul was taken for a ride by an outlandish con and thought, how could anyone fall for that? From the silver-tongued religious cult leaders who can convince their followers to part with fortunes, to the ambitious street urchins executing a flawless three-card Monte, the art of the scam is as diverse as it is cunning. And then there are those budding con artists, forever on the lookout for their unsuspecting investor to swindle with their too-good-to-be-true get-rich-quick schemes. But hold on, aren't we smarter these days? In our era of information overload, shouldn't it be harder to pull the wool over our eyes? Unfortunately not. If anything, it makes it easier. We're just as vulnerable to scams today as our ancestors were centuries ago. The allure of a quick win or a life-changing opportunity blinds even the savviest among us. But don't lose hope. There is good news. The psychology behind these scams is timeless. The charismatic grifter, the vulnerable mark, and the promise of turning dreams into reality. These elements remain unchanged. What evolves are the disguises these tricks wear to stay one step ahead. So they might have a facelift, but inside these cons are literally the oldest trick in the book. In fact, some scams are so brilliantly simple, they've barely changed at all. Why fix what ain't broken, right? So whether you want to know the tricks of the trade, or whether you're a con artist seeking inspiration, today's deep dive into the world of cons, scams, swindles, and frauds will unravel the historical threads of deceit. Street crime. Hands down, street crime is the staple of all scams, because it only needs a lone trickster and an unsuspecting sucker. Why pull off an Ocean's 11 heist when you can lift someone's wallet when they're not looking? At the core of street crime is pickpocketing, a craft so ancient it predates pockets. Since humans learned to walk upright, pickpockets have been honing their sleight of hand, but for the most part, their wicked ways were not widely known. Then came along Charles Dickens. His character of Oliver Twist helped the public consciousness understand the criminal underworld in detail. Yet this is no mere literary fancy. Pickpockets are in every country, every culture, and every time. But when it comes to one of the most well-known, we have to turn to Mary Frith. Born in 1584, she carved her legend in 16th century London, not just with her deft fingers, but with a bold fashion statement: cross-dressing. She wasn't just defying the law, she was thumbing her nose at societal norms by smoking a pipe and strutting in men's attire. But she wasn't challenging gender roles because of an identity crisis. It was simply a way to stick it to the man, similar to why punks have green mohawks and nose piercings. Usually, standing out from the crowd isn't a good thing for a pickpocket, but Mary's skills were famous. Her signature move is how we got the word cut purse, because she would, you guessed it, cut the strings of a purse before making a quick getaway. Her antics were so legendary that plays were written about her during her lifetime. She would even star on stage by dressing as a man. Apparently, that was a bigger social faux pas in 17th century England than theft. But you don't have to be bold like Mary to be an effective pickpocket. Sometimes the pickpocket works solo. They stick close to a mark and finger any light objects. Other times, there's a team, one to distract, the other to extract. It's an art form so effective, so timeless, not even the CCTV or beat cops can stop them. So it's time to learn how history works as we pull back the curtain on history scams. We now break from our regular programming to bring you a message from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. A jolly old friend of mine was recently in an accident and had a few injuries, and he made the mistake of not calling a lawyer. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you that you shouldn't be like my friend. Submitting a claim with Morgan & Morgan is as easy as 1, 2, 3. No need to visit law offices and sit through laborious consultations. It only takes 8 clicks from your handheld device. Simply add your case details, sign contracts, and add medical records all from the ease of your snazzy mobile phone. Contacting a personal injury lawyer is the obvious first step in a car accident. Best of all, it doesn't cost you a nickel unless you win. You can let Morgan & Morgan fight for you, and join the 3 million people that trust Morgan & Morgan to fight for them every year. Head over to forthepeople.com/howhistoryworks to get started today. Street cons and hustles. The next step up is the street con. Think of this like the Pokemon evolution of street crime. They require more showmanship, planning, and subtler manipulation. These are all about deception in plain sight. Take the classic Three-Card Monte, a true masterpiece of street deception. Here, the dealer, and by that I mean the con artist, puts down cards and shuffles them for a game of Find the Lady. However, a planted accomplice, the shill, plays along, engineering a loss so close to victory that you're lured into a false sense of triumph. But remember, in this game, the only winning move is not to play. There is no chance of winning. I repeat, there is no chance of winning. It's a sleight of hand whereby the dealer hides cards beneath one another. This ironclad con first emerged in the 15th century, though the most well-known operator was Canada Bill Jones. He was the 19th century maestro of the Monte. He was such a good crook that newspapers lauded him as the greatest of confidence men. Unfortunately for him, his success as a riverboat gambler couldn't prevent him from dying a pauper. It goes to show, crime doesn't pay. Then there's the shell game, the Three-Card Monte's crafty cousin, tracing its roots to ancient Greece and gaining notoriety in the painting of the European Middle Ages until bursting into popularity in the 19th century with the advent of circuses and fairs. It's a game of finding a ball hidden under one of 3 cups. To the sucker, it appears as if the dealer is just moving the cups around at lightning speed. In reality, the ball is discreetly removed right under the mark's nose. These street cons prove that the most straightforward illusions have a timeless allure. But for criminals eager to hit the jackpot, they'd need to get more creative. Counterfeiting. Is it any surprise that you'll find the roots of counterfeiting stretch all the way back to the creation of coinage? The craft of faking money is as old as money itself. In ancient Rome, cunning crooks mastered the art of shaving precious metals from coins, and then melting them down to mint their own fortunes. Some even took to crafting coins from cheaper metals. Of course, they had to coat them in a thin veneer of gold or silver to complete the illusion. In those days, they didn't have today's advanced systems for detecting fake cash, so defrauding an individual was as easy as destabilizing an economy. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and you'll find blacksmiths doing the trick of melting down metals to forge money. But as the art of minting grew more sophisticated, the forger's task became increasingly challenging. Nowadays, banknotes contain all kinds of fail-safes like the weight of the paper, hidden ink, and images that only appear when held up to light. Yet, counterfeiters weren't deterred. They simply shifted gears. Why fake money when you could fake things that were more valuable? By the 9th century, bishops, hungry for power, began crafting fake decrees which they alleged were written by earlier popes. These decrees granted them new powers and rights, which means it was the papal equivalent of faking your parents' signature on your report card. Fast forward to 14th century Hungary, and we meet Archdeacon György Hondo, a master forger whose false documents and seals were so convincing that they swayed political decisions and territorial claims. Then came the era of art forgery, and with it, Han van Meegeren, a Dutch painter who duplicated masterpieces in the 20th century. He had a particular penchant for Johannes Vermeer's work. His pièce de résistance, The Supper at Emmaus, it was so brilliantly forged it duped art experts and Nazis alike, including Hermann Göring. Telling the difference between a work of art and its fake requires a delicate balance of art history, a keen eye, and meticulous scientific analysis to determine whether materials and pigments used are from modern times or bygone eras. But Van Meegeren was simply filling a void left by demand, a demand that surged during the Renaissance as classical art and artifacts became all the rage. Enterprising forgers of the time didn't stop at canvases. They turned to the arduous task of sculpting entire statues to sell off as ancient treasures. Counterfeiting from metal to marble, from paper to paint, is a testament to the lengths some will go for the perfect swindle. But all these are nothing compared to the other long cons. Real estate. It's been said that real estate is the best, quickest, safest, and the only way to get wealthy. And it certainly is for scammers. Faking deeds and property rights is one of history's oldest forms of fraudulence, but it's not just quaint farmhouses and new city developments that are bought and sought. Enter Victor Lustig, a maestro of deceit in the roaring 1920s who sold the Eiffel Tower. The renowned Austrian-Hungarian scammer dressed up as a government official and promised scrap metal dealers that the Eiffel Tower was due to be torn down. After all, the Eiffel Tower was originally planned as a temporary attraction for the World Fair. Plus, there were recent newspaper articles about the landmark's maintenance costs and public approval ratings. This air of legitimacy was so vital in helping him pull off the con so well that he sold the Eiffel Tower twice. Meanwhile, over in the US, George C. Parker was making a career by selling New York's landmarks. His portfolio included the Brooklyn Bridge, Madison Square Garden, and the Statue of Liberty. But his targets were not desperate businessmen. He preyed upon the naivety of trusting immigrants. His ruse was uncovered when police caught his victims erecting tool booths along the Brooklyn Bridge. Though Parker's escapades included a daring courthouse escape in a sheriff's uniform, his luck eventually ran out. His fourth conviction would be his last, and he spent his final days locked up behind the bars of Sing Sing prison. But the crown jewel of property cons belongs to Scottish charlatan Gregor MacGregor, who sold a country that didn't exist. In the 1820s, he approached European investors with his fake Central American country of Poyes, complete with a fake currency and fake history. In the end, 250 people immigrated across the world only to discover that their new home country wasn't real. Speaking of things that aren't real, spiritualism and religion. Spiritual deception is as old as the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. Here, the Pythia would deliver cryptic prophecies, especially to wealthy patrons who would pay to hear good things. The ancient practice of BS has evolved into the modern theatrics of cold reading, where today's mediums of psychics feign divine insight. It's a simple yet effective combination of high-probability guesses and body language analysis to guide a conversation. Check out any modern-day medium, and you'll see them employing a technique known as cold reading. But these spiritual deceptions aren't confined to dimly lit rooms with crystal balls. They've found their ways into the realms of entrepreneurship with religious fervor. Pyramid schemes, for instance, use similar manipulative tactics, preying on fears and aspirations around wealth and freedom. Thankfully, not every phony psychic escapes the law. American televangelist Jim Bakker built himself an empire of fame and fortune off the backs of credulous, desperate folk. He used their money to create a Christmas theme park, but when it came to light that he was embezzling their investment, the jig was up. He even used $250,000 to pay off a secretary who had accused him of rape. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. In the end, he went down for 24 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy, though he only served 5 years for his 45-year prison sentence. However, his short stint did him good. He emerged from prison a changed man who believed in the impending apocalypse, and just so happened to have doomsday kits to sell. One scammer who did feel the pain of guilt was Marjo Gortner, a child preacher prodigy turned whistleblower. As a 4-year-old, his parents groomed him into becoming the youngest ever ordained minister. During the 1972 Oscar-winning documentary Marjo, he revealed the tricks of the preacher trade, such as stagecraft, rhetorical devices, and how to count wads of cash in a seedy hotel room. Though no doubt one of the reasons for his disillusionment with the exploitive preacher circuit was when his dad absconded with millions of dollars. He did turn his life around though. He stopped pretending, and he became an actor. But perhaps the most well-known spiritual scammer was Rasputin. The mysterious Russian mystic entered the royal courts with his alleged healing abilities and prophetic powers, and, of course, his prowess in the bedroom. However, historians now regard him as nothing more than a randy charlatan who manipulated those around him for his own personal gain. Go figure. But what all these stories show is that dreams, fears, and anxieties of humans never change, which is exactly why this next con attracts so many suckers. Investment schemes. Thomas Tusser first said, "A fool and his money are soon parted," way back in 1557. If he'd been around when the stock market was invented, he might have said, "A fool and another person's money are soon parted." That's because the labyrinthian design of investment scams is intricately designed to bamboozle amateurs and distract professionals. Take, for instance, Pharaoh Psamtik I of ancient Egypt, who was outwitted by his own mercenaries in recorded history's earliest finance cons. He had hired a group of Greek mercenaries to serve in his army, but once their services had concluded, he did not pay them. So the mercenaries came up with a scheme to get their payback. Literally. Their plan? A fake ransom. The leader of the mercenaries, Phanes, left his own children in Egypt as supposed guarantee of his return, but instead he fled to Libya, where he advised the king to send a large sum of money back to Egypt. But instead of the pharaoh getting a payday, the mercenaries intercepted the gold, took the children, and got out of town, leaving the ruler without money or soldiers. If that's confused you, that's fine. Financial scams are designed to feel either too easy or too hard to understand, which means you are either lulled into a false sense of security or defer to the con artist to do the math for you. That's why Charles Ponzi's scheme became so famous. During the roaring 1920s, Ponzi audaciously promised investors outrageously high returns on their investments in international reply coupons. The catch? He used one group of investment money to pay off returns to another group of investors. In essence, he was passing dollar bills down the line to make them believe he was generating wealth. As expected, the house of cards eventually collapsed under its own weight, but he almost got away with it. When a Boston financial writer suggested that Charles Ponzi was up to no good, the con artist sued him for libel, and won. Ponzi was awarded $500,000 in damages, which would be around 10 million big ones today. Still, that's a drop in the ocean compared to Bernie Madoff, who pulled off the largest Ponzi scheme in the history of the world. He defrauded a staggering $65 billion from his clients, who included Steven Spielberg, Larry King, and Kevin Bacon. His crimes came to an end when clients wanted to pull their money out during the 2008 financial crisis. But it was his own sons who called the cops when he confessed to them that his business was, quote, a giant Ponzi scheme. Then there was Enron, the behemoth of the energy world, whose scandal rocked corporate America. Through a web of complex accounting charades, Enron's top brass masked debt and inflated the company's value to astronomical heights. Thankfully, skeptical analysts and investigative reporters exposed discrepancies in the company's finance reports. When the truth surfaced, the bubble burst. Investors pulled out, resulting in a rapid share price drop that caused the company to collapse. The result was the largest bankruptcy due to fraud of all time. As for the culprits, they got between 5 and 12 years in jail, but their victims had already lost hundreds of millions in retirement funds and lifetime savings. That brings us neatly to our final scam. It's the newest one in human history, but something tells us it's going to be around for a long time. Bitcoin. Whatever you think of blockchain technology or cryptocurrency, you must admit, it's a gold rush for scammers. Fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye. Picture Jimmy Zhong, a modern-day digital bandit who managed to abscond with a staggering $3 billion in Bitcoin. Then there's the enigmatic social media rapper Razzlecon and her hacker husband masterminding a $4.5 billion crypto laundering saga like an internet version of Bonnie and Clyde. And then there's the lucrative pump and dump schemes pulled off by Logan Paul and Brian King Legend. That's not his real name, of course. Typically, these cons work by acquiring large amounts of new coin quietly and secretly. The second phase is creating buzz by spreading rumors and that the coin is the next big thing. As the frenzy mounts, so does the price. Amateur investors, lured by the promise of a quick buck, pile in. As soon as the price has been driven up sufficiently, the original puppet masters sell their holdings at an inflated price, grab their cash, and skedaddle. Their promotion grinds to a halt. The artificial demand evaporates, and the inflated crypto bubble bursts, leaving a trail of financial ruin in its wake. But the most dramatic fall from grace belongs to Sam Bankman-Fried, once the golden boy of the crypto world who was vocal about transparency and regulation in the Bitcoin space. That came to bite him in the butt because he was found guilty of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His towering fortune of $15 to $25 billion came tumbling down. He's now worth a grand total of zero, and is now facing up to decades behind bars. But at least he'll have the time to think about how things could have been different if he just did the Nigerian prince scam. But who is more guilty? The con artists or the people who are easily duped? Tell us about your experiences in the comments below. Some corporations are able to run some of the biggest scams in the guise of a corporation because they've built very close connections to the government. To find out more, go and watch our video on Amway. And share this with someone who's always looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, and subscribe to keep on learning how history works.